Totravetraikapanaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetamritaduhe Namaha. Hare Krishna. Welcome back to our Bhagavad Gita Bhakti Shastri course. We are in the middle of the 13th chapter. We're discussing the 20 items of knowledge, and we were discussing last time the difference between affection and attachment. So affection refers to a natural emotional human connection which is there and which has to be there. It's vital for relationships to exist. When we are relating with people, we have to relate with them as complete persons. We can't say of a person, I love your soul, I don't care for your body. No, when we care for the complete person. There's a famous incident when Srila Prabhupada once in Mayapur in his Vyas Puja day, devotees, thousands of devotees were coming and glorifying him and offering flowers and obeisances. And one devotee was limping slightly, and Prabhupada asked him, while all this arati was going on, Prabhupada called him forward and asked him what had happened. And he explained that he had got some wound because of something. And then Prabhupada there, while his Vyas Puja giving, told him, Prabhupada gave him a prescription of how to prepare some homemade medicine by which he could cure the pain in the leg. So Prabhupada was concerned, when he came to know that in Mayapur the devotees were not getting proper prasad. Prabhupada said, no, prasad should be proper. So now the important point here to understand is that the relationships have, now of course you could say this is the relationship between guru and disciple, and the guru is caring for even the body, the disciple. But in general, all relationships, we can't separate the body, the mind and the soul. When we are taking care, we take care of all three, the body, the mind and the soul. Protection means not just spiritual protection, telling people this is right, this is wrong, this is good for you, this is bad for you. That is important, but along with that, people should also feel valued, people should feel cared, people should feel, in fact, cherished. The success of our movement is very much dependent on how we can steadily inspire devotees to keep practicing devotional service throughout their life. So once a person comes to the shelter of Krishna, taking care of the person who has come to the shelter of Krishna is also important, so that person can go on lifelong and feel cared and inspired. So often the emphasis on detachment from family members can have a negative effect in terms of irresponsibility. Detachment is not irresponsibility. See, we discussed this briefly earlier, but a detachment means a lack of excessive emotional entanglement in material things, whereas irresponsibility means evasiveness, means unwillingness to shoulder a burden which is actually one's own. So if a person is in family life, then the person has to take care of the family. And there's at one time, the temple was emphasizing book distribution, and earlier ISKCON was more of temple-centered not just congregation movement. It was entirely a temple-based movement. So even the household devotees would stay in the temple. So at one time, to increase the book distribution, the temple authorities told the Matajis that you can just distributing the books of Srila Prabhupada is more important than taking care of your babies. And the mothers were very disturbed by that. It is a fundamental maternal instinct and in the need of every woman to take care of her child. And then one Mataji wrote a letter to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada wrote back a strong letter. He says, what is this strange thing? He said, your mother, these are Vaikuntha children, you have to take care of those children. And the children are gift of God. And then, so Prabhupada wanted to avoid both extremes. So on one side, he did not want the Matajis to neglect their home responsibilities for the sake of missionary activities. At the same time, he also did not want them to be restricted to home activities and be not allowed to participate in missionary activities. There has to be balance. So the same applies to the husband also. The husband has to take care of the family. Detachment doesn't mean that one neglects one's family members. needs, either it's emotionally or spiritually. So that means one has to actually be, as it is said, be affectionate but not attached. Attached would mean that we may say that the dividing line is not so easy to discern, and that is correct. It is always it's not that we have to walk on the line all the time. Sometimes we may be on the left, sometimes we may be on the right, and overall we'll move in the right direction. The important point to recognize is that we need to have a clear understanding, at least conceptually or at least philosophically. To be affectionate is not only not undesirable, actually it is essential. And these relationships, in the Bhagavatam there is a verse about how it's the third canto, especially the section of the Avahuti and Kardamuni, how the wife is the protection for a husband, like a fortress. And there are several verses like this, but Srila Prabhupada is explaining over here that they're natural objects of affection. So only in extreme situations where the horizontal relationship is a obstacle to a vertical relationship, and it's an insurmountable obstacle, then some extreme action may be required. But we shouldn't assume that an obstacle is insurmountable right from the beginning. In general, we should try to practice our devotional service in a way that doesn't unnecessarily disturb others, and others include our family members. Now, we may say that even my basic chanting of Hare Krishna is disturbing others. No, we have to, over a period of time, understand that more or less most parts of the world, we live in a democratic society, and every individual has certain right to make certain choices. So we should communicate to our family members that I feel inspired to live according to certain principles, and this is what I'm going to practice. And we don't have to impose them on others. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that we have to give up our devotional practices for the sake of others. So attachment, a good example of attachment is Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana. So that means even when a person is going on the wrong track, one allows that person to go on the wrong track. And in fact, oneself supports that wrong track, because one cannot say no to that person. That would be attachment. So one has to be sensitive and careful in these things. So now Prabhupada talks about this, and then he further says that he basically talks about how one can spiritualize one's family, like chanting Hare Krishna, worshipping the deity, discussing Bhagavad Gita. Basically, the 5 potent limbs of devotional service, taking prasad, all this, can spiritualize the home life. And Prabhupada further says that Vivikta Desha Sevitvam Aratir Jana Samsadi. Vivikta Desha Sevitvam. A devotee has no taste, as Prabhupada writes, for unnecessary sporting or cinema going or enjoying some social function. So the idea here is that a devotee understands that there have to be priorities in life. We have only so much time, and we need to engage in serious devotional service. So how do we engage in serious devotional service? By using all our time in purposeful ways. So there are certain forms of socialization which are considered normal in modern society. But are they actually normal? Do they actually lead to a bonding at a deeper level? There is the word people use, hang out. I hang out with my friends. Hang out means people go and gossip about others, or people go and have a drink together, or people go and do all sorts of pointless things together. So is hanging out really a form of bonding? Does it really lead to deep, meaningful, satisfying relationships? Not necessarily, and most often not. So it's not that devotees don't want to have relationships. We can have relationships with others, naturally have relations with our family members and others, also depending on our profession or our locality or whatever. But the important point is that a devotee wants to not socialize in a way that is detrimental to one's devotional service. So how one will balance this between how a devotee would like to socialize and how materialistic people would like to socialize, and where we can find a balance, that is something which every individual has to decide one's own. But the point is, it's not that devotional service is against socialization. In fact, Prabhupada made a society, International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Society means actually there is socialization. Now, of course, within the devotee community, we would like to have socialization that is Krishna-centered. And when we have to socialize with others, we do it in such a way that it gradually helps us in our Krishna consciousness, or at least protects our Krishna, or doesn't harm our Krishna consciousness. So now, Vivikta Desha Sevitvam Aratir Jana Samsadi Adhyatma Gyan Nityatvam Tattva Gyanartha Darshanam. So, Aratir Jana Samsadi, not mixing where materialistic people mix. So, a devotee focuses on not getting contaminated by material desires. That doesn't mean a devotee cannot mix with materialistic people at all. But you have to understand there are infections that are always possible, and we have to protect ourselves. So once one understands that Adhyatma Gyan Nityatvam, that it is spiritual knowledge alone that will last, and that inspires a person to search for spiritual knowledge with seriousness and gravity. And Tattva Gyanartha Darshanam. Tattva Gyanartha. One tries to understand what is the philosophical truth of life. And in this way, one moves forward in one's spiritual life. So now Prabhupada explains that what is the antithesis of humility. Antithesis means exactly opposite. To think oneself God is most puffed up. Although the living entity is always being kicked by the stringent laws of material nature, he still thinks, I am God, because of ignorance. For the beginning of knowledge, therefore, is amanitva. So Prabhupada goes in a full circle. He starts initially by talks about amanitva in the initial part of the purport, and he concludes again with the same point. So, actually speaking, we may not, there are some Mayavadis, some self-styled godmen, who claim to be God. But apart from that, there are many others who do not necessarily claim to be God, but they also claim to be they may also want to be numero uno, and that is one way of claiming to be God also. So actually this whole idea is antithetical to amanitvam. So devotee wants to be humble. That does not necessarily mean that devotee doesn't have talents or use talents in Krishna's service, but a devotee does not draw more attention to oneself, and devotee doesn't want glorification on oneself. If a devotee has to come in the attention, public attention, so that people can understand and people can become understand Krishna and come closer to Krishna, devotee does that as a service. But a devotee doesn't think that I am great or I am greatest. So now etaj jnanam iti proktam ajnanam yadato anyatha. Now everything apart from this is ignorance. Now what does it mean? With the word ignorance and knowledge, they can have multiple meanings in different contexts. Now what we study in physics, in chemistry, in economics, all this is knowledge, definitely. It has its validity and its utility in its own sphere. Here Krishna is talking about jnana primarily in terms of the jnana that enables one to become spiritually advanced, to gain liberation from material existence. Now Krishna is not here talking about varnashram. Yes, there may not have been subjects like, say, physics and chemistry specifically, directly like that, as they are taught today in today's universities. But there were varnashram, and in varnashram, every varna had its own specialized skills and techniques which people had to learn. So there were artisans and there were other skilled people who would teach the skills generation after generation. The Kshatriyas would teach their Kshatriyas, next generation of Kshatriyas. The Brahmanas would train the next generation of Brahmanas, and that's how the skills, the legacy would continue. Succession is an important concern, and succession was taken care of that way. So it's not that acquiring material skills was entirely neglected. The material skills are essential for functioning in the material world. And if we look at the kind of, say, architecture that were made in the Vedic culture, Vedic times, or for the matter of the kind of music, the kind of dance, even the kind of literature that were written. So they are all high class. As you discussed earlier, the Mahabharata is by far the world's longest poem. It is 7 times longer than the Iliad and the Odyssey combined together, which were the Germanic sagas that were considered to be long poems. So obviously writing like this doesn't come for lazy people. It requires hard work. So definitely there's hard work, but the important point is that we may say that is about God. Yes, most of the skills that were there, they were about God. And they were somehow connected with God, somehow connected with Dharma, and that is good. But the important point is, etaj jnanam iti proktam ajnanam yadatonyatha. Apart from this, everything else is ignorance. What does it mean? None of that is going to help us make advancement to come out of material existence. So it may make things relatively better within material existence temporarily, but it can't help us to come out of material existence. And jnana, as Krishna has defined earlier in this chapter itself, kshetra kshetragyayorevam yattaj jnanam matam. To understand the kshetra and kshetragya, that is jnana. So the point is that it may be, so we can again look at it from the point of view of multiple levels of jnana. So modern science can be called as a kind of material knowledge, which doesn't, modern science or general modern education, it's material knowledge. It has its validity and utility in its own place, but it does not help a person to seek for liberation or to attain liberation in and of itself. So that's why that is not considered to be jnana from the point of view of what jnana a spiritualist a spiritual seeker wants. Now after describing what is jnana, Krishna will now describe what is jneya. So let's start with 13.13. This is the third section from this chapter. Let's quickly look at the overview of the chapter. Yeah. So we discussed Arjuna's 6 questions. That was the start. Then we discussed the kshetra and kshetragya. Then we discussed jnana. Now we are going to discuss jneya. So now jneya, let's jneyam yattat pravakshami yajñātvā amritam ashnute anādimat param brahma nasattanna saduchyate. So jneyam yattat pravakshami. So Krishna is making the transition points very quite clear over here. He says that this, what was told in the previous verse, was jnana. Etat jnanam iti proktam. This is jnana. Now he says, now I'll speak about jneya. Jneyam yattat pravakshami. Pravakshami means I'll speak. Yajñātvā amritam ashnute. By knowing this, one will attain amrita. Anadi matparam brahma. Anadi matparam. So anadi means beginningless. Matparam means subordinate to me. Brahma. Nasat tanna saduchyate. It is nasat tanna sad. It is beyond the cause and effect of this world. So sat and asat can mean temporary or eternal. Prabhupada, it can also mean multiple things. So here Prabhupada translates sat and asat to mean cause and effect. Now what is it that is to be known? Jneya. There are many things which can be known, but the important principle is to recognize that jneya is ultimately the Atma and the Paramatma and the Supreme Lord. Rather, so the Super Paramatma is one manifestation of the Supreme Lord. Ultimately, the final object of jneya is the absolute truth. That's what we want to know. All of us want to know. So we initially inquire outwards. We look outwards. And by looking outwards, we try to understand, well, what is it? What is it that is a reality? That is one approach of looking at knowledge. That is okay. Let's understand this a little bit better from another perspective. Yeah. So, what are the different modes of understanding ourselves and the world around us? To understand things, we can look outwards, we can look inwards, or we can look upwards. There are three primary ways. We look outwards, then we see the world of matter. And based on matter, the whole school of thought called materialism comes up. And materialism largely relies on pratyaksha praman. It focuses on the understanding of scriptural, of all of reality in terms of matter, because matter is what we can perceive. When we look outwards, we look with our eyes and we don't see spiritual reality at that time. That's why it is normally that those who just rely on their own external observation, they come to some kind of naturalistic conclusions that nature itself is supreme or matter is supreme. Now there are others who look inwards and they think, by looking inwards we can understand the absolute truth. That is one valid way of looking at things. But the problem with looking inwards is that generally we can't see much beyond the mind. When people talk about external and internal, often they have the reference point of the body. So what is outside the body is external and what is inside the body is internal. But this is a body-based distinction of external and internal. Actually, from the body's perspective, what is inside is not just the real I. There is also the mind, which is the pseudo I. The mind makes us think that its emotions are our emotions. So if we just turn inwards without any guidance, then we mistake the mind to be me. And the psychological approach is based on anuman. Generally, when we turn inwards, we can't see things as clearly as we can see externally. Of course, externally also we can't see everything very clearly. But when we turn inwards, it's like the inner territory is mostly filled with our guessworks and inferences. So it's anuman. So both these are useful ways of acquiring knowledge, but more important than both of them is to look upwards and to wait for descending revelation. So revelation enables us not only to get direct knowledge descending from Krishna, but it also helps us to make sense of what we are observing externally and internally. So what we observe externally through pratyaksha and what we observe internally through anuman. This is a very rough division to just communicate the idea of what are the broad categories of acquiring knowledge. But overall, these categories will vary depending on nobody learns everything just by looking externally, and nobody looks entirely internally to try to learn things. People try to mix and mash things up, and they don't necessarily always get a good result from their mixing up of other things. But essentially, outward, inwards and upwards, there are three ways, the directions in which we can go in the search of knowledge. So the object of knowledge, or the goal for which we are searching through knowledge, is called as jneya. And jneya can be known in various ways. So Krishna is now telling in this verse, jneyam yattat pravakshami yajñātvā amrutam ashnute. So yajñātvā amrutam ashnute. Amrutam ashnute means that this is, by knowing this jneya, one will attain amruta. Now what does it mean, amruta? How will one attain amruta? This amruta does not refer to the celestial nectar, the nectar that is available in heaven, the somaras or anything like that. Jnātvā amrutam ashnute. Here amruta refers to immortality. Actually, when we understand the jneya, when we understand the object of knowledge, we understand the soul and the Lord, and we understand the relationship between the two, and that relationship enables us to taste the nectar of pure devotion. Initially the nectar of devotion and eventually the nectar of pure devotion. And finally we go back to the spiritual world, where we can keep tasting the nectar of pure devotion eternally without any obstacles. So this is jnātvā amrutam ashnute. Amrutam. Amrutam means that which is nectarian, that which is eternal. And then further it is said that Anadimat Param Brahma. So this is one of the verses in which different acharyas take different positions about what the terms mean. So from the verses 13 to 17 in this section, they can all mean either the Atma, or they can mean the Brahman, or they can mean the Paramatma. So in general, we'll have to look at the Acharya's commentaries to understand what is being referred to over here. So what is the difference between Atma and Brahman? The Atma is one unit of consciousness, whereas the Brahman is like an ocean of consciousness. It's all Sachitananda. So Mat Param Brahma, that which is dependent on me, Brahma, Anadi Mat Param Brahma, Nasattanna Saduchyate. That is beyond the cause and effect of this world. What does it mean to be beyond the cause and effect? Actually, the cause and effect just goes on generation after generation. Now, people ask this question that who created, who came first? Did the chickens come first, or did the eggs come first? Now, if you go from the purely logical perspective, the result of this sort of reasoning is that if a chicken came first, then we get a question, where did the chickens come from? And if the eggs come first, then the question comes, where did the eggs come from? So either way, it seems to be chicken come from the eggs and the eggs come from the chicken. But what is the origin of either? Both of them have an origin, and that is explained to be the origin in terms of Sarvakarana Karanam, the absolute truth. So that absolute truth, that spiritual reality, is beyond the Nasattanna Saduchyate, is beyond the cause and effect cycle of this material existence. So in fact, Nasattanna Saduchyate, in physics or in science in general, scientists have often talked about the concept of causal completeness. Causal completeness means one, the reason they give why God doesn't exist, or why God doesn't matter, not necessarily God doesn't exist. They say even if God exists, actually all of material phenomena operate according to material laws. And because material phenomena operate according to material laws, so therefore there is no room for God to play any role. If I throw a stone down, the stone is going to fall. Why? Based on the laws of gravity. So it's not that God can suddenly intervene and stop the stone from flying. We don't see that kind of interventions happening. They're not scientifically observable, verifiable. So therefore they say that the material phenomena are causally complete. There is no need to postulate any cause beyond what are found within the arena of matter. So in one sense they are correct, because Krishna has made the world in such a way that he doesn't have to intervene constantly for the management of this world. That's why whenever he descends, as happened in Janmashtami, that is an extremely rare event in terms of the vastness of the cosmic cycles. And it's as we know, it's only once in a day of Brahma, and it's extraordinary. So when we understand this, Nasattanna Saduchyate, that means that absolute truth exists beyond the realm of matter and material causes and material effects. Material causes and material effects have their own cycle, but beyond that cyclic existence do exist the spiritual things. So now what does this refer to? Mat Param Brahma. Now Prabhupada, some previous acharyas, some of them say that this refers to Paramatma. Prabhupada explains this to refer to Brahma. And Brahma is that absolute truth. So Prabhupada quotes several verses over here from the Shvedashvatara Upanishad. Pradhana Kshetragya Patir Ganeshah. So Pradhana Kshetragya Patir. Not Ganesha, so it's Guneshah. So Guneshah is the Lord of the modes. Ganesha would be the Lord of the people. Ganesha. So Guneshah. So here it is. There are many Kshetragya, but this is the Pradhana Kshetragya. This is one Kshetragya who knows about all Kshetras. And he is the Pati, he is the master, and he is the Lord of the modes. So here what is the first verse is saying that actually what is the importance of knowing about Brahma? if you, by knowing about Brahma, one will be able to become liberated from the cycle of birth and death. So why do people who are often about to die, in the Vedic tradition, if somebody is about to die, at that time other people go and seek blessings and seek forgiveness from offenses. And the whole purpose of this is to enable people to understand that we shouldn't let these things block us from our connection with the absolute truth. So we don't want to have negative feelings. We don't want to have harsh emotions towards anyone, and we don't want them to have it. So that is called as an emotional closure. So we close, yes, this relationship. Now forgiveness has been given, forgiveness has been received, and now we calm down. And we calm down, and then with a peaceful mind, one can turn towards what is coming next. When a devotee understands that it is Krishna who is coming next, the devotee can turn the mind towards Krishna also more peacefully and more purposefully. So, of course, at one level we can say that material distractions never end, and that is definitely true. But at the same time, there are some minor distractions, some major distractions, and taking care of the major distractions is extremely important for us to be able to focus on the major things. So we shouldn't dub all distractions as minor and neglect them, nor should we make all distractions as major and obsess over them so much that we can't do any purposeful activity. Our primary purpose is to serve Krishna, and whatever distracts us from service to Krishna, and to the extent it distracts us from service to Krishna, to that extent accordingly we give it whatever attention is required. So dasa bhuto harereva nanyasya kadachana. Dasa bhuto harereva. The living entity is always the servant of Lord Hari. Nanyaseva kadachana. Actually, there is no other position for the living entity. So Prabhupada takes this to refer to the Brahma, Matparam Brahma, to refer to the Jiva. Now the subsequent verses, they start talking about the all-pervading aspect of the absolute truth, which is the jneya. Sarvata panipadam tat sarvato akshishiro mukham sarvata shruti malloke sarvam avrutti tishtati. Sarvam avrutti tishtati. So that this absolute truth pervades everything, exists pervading everything, sarva avrutya. And this itself should indicate what is it that pervades everything. That is the Brahman, that is the impersonal absolute. Sarvata pani padam tad. Everywhere are the hands and legs. Sarvato akshishiro mukham. Everywhere are the akshi shiro mukham. Everywhere are the eyes, the head and the face. Sarvatah shruti malloke. And everywhere are the ears. So the eyes, the head, the mouth, the ears, the hands, the legs are everywhere. And what does it indicate? It indicates that this is talking about. Now generally we don't talk about the Brahman as having any personal attributes. We don't talk about the Brahman as having face and hands and legs. So Sarvam Avrutti Tishtati can refer to the Brahman. But then the other features that are talked about, having hands, having legs, which are everywhere, that doesn't, what does it refer to? So now if you see, if we look from our philosophical perspective, we may say, oh, this is so easy. This is Paramatma. Paramatma is present in Andantarastha Paramanu Chayantarastham. Andantarastham. That the Paramatma is situated in the Brahmanda, and the Paramatma is also situated in the Atom. We understand that Paramatma is all pervasive. So what is the implication of the statement that Paramatma is all pervasive? The simple implication is that actually the Paramatma is the jneya. So that is everywhere. The point which is being talked about is that we want to know about him, and it's not knowing about him should not be difficult because he's everywhere. He observes everything, he can do everything, he knows everything. So that is the jneya. Now this is not necessarily a direct description of what the jneya is, but it is a transmission of an intuitive, inspirational understanding of what the jneya is. So that means that Krishna is giving us an insider's perspective. The people often want inside story. Inside story means, say, if there were some terrorist attacks. Say there was a terrorist attack in Mumbai, and on this 26/11, if somebody was in a particular hotel, where Taj Hotel, where the terrorist attack was there, and then that person from inside, somehow that person survived, and that person says, "Oh, what was it? What was it? How was it like? They're coming like this, and they went like that, and they went like that, and they did this, and they did that." So all that, that's insider story. And that inside story or insider story is what people want to know. How was it from inside? So, we can't have the vision that a pure devotee has, because we don't have the devotion that a pure devotee has. That's why we can't see directly from that perspective the things, the material world. But for advanced devotees, they see like that. And Krishna is in here reporting to us the vision that an advanced spiritualist has. I say, Sarvata Pani Padam Tad. Everywhere are the hands and legs. Everywhere are the eyes, the mouth, and the head. Everywhere are the ears. And in this way, the Super Soul exists, pervading everything. What does it actually refer to? It refers to the Paramatma aspect, as we know. But Advaita, this verse is quoted in the pastime of Advaita Acharya, which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu describes in the Mahaprakash Leela, when he is glorifying the various devotees and benedicting them. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu describes how Advaita Acharya was such a great Vaishnava that whatever Vedic literature was brought in front of him, he would explain it in terms of pure devotional service. Instead of beating around the bush and giving other different kinds of explanations, he would explain in terms of pure devotional service. But when he came to this, he just couldn't understand this verse in terms of pure devotional service. And then when he was as fast asleep one night, the Lord itself appeared in his dream and gave him the understanding. What does this verse mean? I said, this is referring to the Paramatma aspect. So for us, Prabhupada has given made things so simple so that we know it's very easy to understand this refers to Paramatma. But for Advaita Acharya, that was a brilliant insight at that time. And that came to him by the grace of the Supreme Lord. So Prabhupada then talks about the potency of the Lord to accept prasad. We will discuss that in 9.26 Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam. So Prabhupada gives one more understanding of how the Lord is all pervading. He quotes from the Brahma Samhita 5.37 over here. Golokeva nivasatya akhilatma bhuto. So Golokeva nivasatya. Nivasatya means one who resides in Goloka. But akhilatma bhuto, that Lord is the all akhilatma bhuto. That means he is the akhilatma. He is for the indwelling super soul of all living beings. That is not the position of the jiva. So now let's look at the next verse. Sarvendriya gunabhasam sarvendriya vivarjitam asaktam sarvabhruchaiva nirgunam gunabhoktrucha. So sarvendriya gunabhasam sarvendriya gunabhasam. That means he is the source of all the gunas. And sarvendriya vivarjitam. Actually, sarvendriya gunabhasam is the source of all the senses and source of all the qualities. But sarvendriya vivarjitam, that absolute truth has no senses, no inner. Sarvendriya vivarjitam, free from all senses. Asaktam sarvabhrukchaiva, that absolute truth is detached from everything, but at the same time sarvabhruk is the maintainer of everyone. Sarvabhrukchaiva nirgunam gunabhoktrucha. So that absolute truth is not affected by any modes, is transcendental to all the modes, but still is the controller of all the modes. Gunabhoktrucha. So in this way, the absolute truth is a reservoir of all contradictory attributes, all integrated into one. Sarvendriya gunabhasam. So what is being referred to over here? Here the point that is being made is that the absolute truth has inconceivable attributes. We saw this point was talked about in the Ishopanishad also. Taddure tadvantike tadejati tannaijati taddure tadvantike tadantarasya sarvasya taddu sarvasyasya bahayataha. So at that point in the Ishopanishad we discussed how that absolute truth walks and does not walk, far away and is close, is inside of everything and still outside of everything. So how is that possible? That is the inconceivability. So inconceivability doesn't mean that we can't understand. It just means that we can't understand at our present level of consciousness. Over a period of time, we'll be able to understand more and more. We'll never understand completely, but we'll be able to properly understand at a deeper level as we keep practicing. So here the point is, 3 sets of contradictions are established. The source of all senses, but is without senses, is the maintainer of all, but is not the maintainer of anyone, and is the Lord of the modes and still is beyond the modes. These are all possible because of the inconceivable potency of the Supreme Lord. So then Prabhupada explains further. Due to materially contaminated senses, we cannot see his form. Therefore, the impersonalists who are still materially affected cannot understand the personality of Godhead. So, why we cannot understand these inconceivable attributes? It is because of our materially contaminated senses. So, bahirantascha bhutanam acharam charameva cha Sukshmatvat tadavijneyam durastham chantike chatat. Bahir antascha bhutanam is situated inside and outside of everything. Acharam chara, is inside and outside of all living beings. Achara and chara, the moving and the non-moving. Sukshmatvat tadavijneyam. Sukshmatvat means because he's very, very subtle. Therefore, avijneyam. We cannot know him properly. It's interesting that this verse has declared the jneya to be avijneya. It started by saying that now I'll talk about jneya, but now it is saying that jneya is avijneya. Avijneyam. Sukshmatvat avijneyam durastham chantike chatat. All this far away is also close by. Chantike chatat. So here the inconceivable attributes. We discussed how tad dure, tad vantike, how that to be understood. For the non-devotees, Krishna is far away. For the devotees, Krishna is close, like that. So in this way, these things can be understood. Sukshimatva tad avijneyam. So Prabhupada explains, Prabhupada quotes from the Upanishads. This is one chapter where Prabhupada quotes a lot from the Upanishads. Because there are parallel passages in the Upanishad which illumine the themes which have been explored in this verse. So, asino duram vrajati shayano yati sarvataha. Shayano. Duram vrajati. Although he resides far away, sarvataha. He is actually also residing everywhere else. He is residing everywhere. He is all pervading. And how can these inconceivable attributes be understood? Well, at one level we can say that the Bhagwan is far away and the Paramatma is close to us. We can say that from the Super Soul is inside us as Shirodaksha Vishnu, and the Mahavishnu is outside us as Mahavishnu, or even as Garbhodaksha Vishnu. So like that we can understand these verses. Another way of understanding it is that this is all recognizing the glory of the Supreme Being who has such extraordinary attributes. Both perspectives are true. So now let's go. Bahivaktam cha bhuteshu vibhaktam iva cha sthitam bhuta bhartru cha dajneyam krasishnu prabha vishnu cha. So avibhaktam cha bhuteshu. Avibhaktam means undivided. Vibhaktam iva cha sthitam. Although he is undivided, he is also acting as if he is divided. How is he divided? Avibhaktam cha bhuteshu vibhaktam iva cha sthitam. Although he is undivided, he is divided. Bhuta bhartru cha tajneyam. Bhuta bhartru is the maintainer of all living beings. Tajneyam, that is the knower. Grasishnu prabha vishnu cha. Grasishnu is that person is the devourer and is also the developer of all things. So here, first of all, avibhaktam, let's look at that. All these verses are essentially talking about the contradictory attributes of the Supreme Absolute Truth. So avibhaktam cha bhuteshu is undivided, but he appears as if divided. How is that? The super soul is one, but the super soul in your heart is there. Super soul in my heart is there. Super soul in each one of our hearts is there. So are the super souls different? No, they are all one super soul, but in many manifestations. That's why avibhaktam vibhaktam ivacha sthitam, as if it's situated separately. Sthitam. Ivacha sthitam. So in Sanskrit there is the word iva and there is the word eva. So iva and eva. And their meanings can be radically different. Eva means like. And eva means certainly. It's a phrase that one may use even in the presence of children. And it's also a phrase, or not a phrase, it's a word actually. It's a word that indicates something which is generally used for emphasizing eva. Whereas eva is for comparing. So vibhaktam ivacha sthitam. It's as if it's separated. Just like if we have a moon overhead, and then that moon is say reflected in a dozen puddles on the ground. After rains, there have been some puddles formed in the ground, and at night when the moon comes out in the sky, the moon is reflected in the puddles. So now when it is reflected in the puddles, at that time the moon is the same, but it's also not the same when it is reflected. Why is it the same? It is the same because it's that same one moon which has been reflected. But it is not the same because the reflection does not contain all the potency of that moon. So, of that moon, it cannot illumine to the same degree. It cannot offer the same warmth. It cannot do most of the things that we assume people are able to do. So, of course, the example is material and it doesn't necessarily apply entirely because the super soul is not like that. Super soul can expand and still remain the same being. Vibhaktam ivacha sthitam is separated, is still he's one also. And then bhuta bhartru cha jneyam bhuta bhartru, that absolute truth is the maintainer of everyone. And gasishnu prabha vishnu cha, but is also the destroyer of everyone and the creator of everyone. So here basically we know time has these three aspects. Through the time creation happens, maintenance happens, and destruction happens. And here the point of that absolute truth being the transcendental to the material changes is brought out by saying that actually all those three material changes are the agencies of time. So it is through time that creation happens, it is through time that maintenance occurs, it is through time that destruction happens. So we are all ultimately instruments. Sometimes in the Bhagavatam there is a verse which says that pathichutam tishtati, that when a person loses money, the wallet falls on the road and person loses the money. Sometimes it may well happen that a person comes back after 2-3 days and find the wallet still there, or maybe a boy working in a local neighborhood finds that money and keeps it, and when the real owner comes along, gives the money to that person. So in that way one understands that things are not in my control. I lost the money and it could very well have been lost, but if the Lord had willed that the money be there, it is there. Otherwise I may have the money in my pocket, but somebody can steal it from my pocket also. So what essentially it means is that our actions are not final, they are not decisive. Sometimes a man and a woman unite, and although both the woman is fertile and the man is potent, still there is no progeny that happens. No child is born. Why is that? That indicates that just the husband and the wife, the man and the woman, are not the only doers. So it is God who is creating through them. It is God who is protecting the money through the negligence of the people who are around, too busy to look at the money. So like that, the ultimate doer is, whether it is creation, whether it is destruction, whether it is maintenance, is the Supreme Lord. And remembering that is important. The bhuta bhartru cha jneyam. So all three are included. It is not that if something is developing, we consider it as good. Something is already big, we consider it to be good. But something on its downside, that's not necessarily what we consider to be good. Things will have to go through circles in this material existence. But that doesn't mean that we have to maximize the pains of the circles. We can deal with them in a philosophical vision, recognizing that it's Krishna who is manifesting. Now, when Parikshit Maharaj was cursed, Parikshit Maharaj saw that it is Lord Krishna who has come to me as this curse, and he has given me the opportunity to take shelter of him in the form of Harikatha. So, what is the meaning of that? He saw that death as also time for a form of the absolute truth, Grasishnu. Grasishnu. It is that death has come in that form. So let's go to the next verse now. Jyotisham api tad jyotis tamasah paramuchyate jnanam jneyam jnanagamyam hridhi sarvasya avasthitam. So Jyotisham api tad jyotis. Jyotisham. That means among all luminous objects, I am the light. Tamasah paramuchyate. I am beyond all darkness. Jnanam jneyam jnanagamyam hridhi sarvasya avasthitam. I am situated in the heart of all living beings. So I am situated in the heart of all living beings. What does it mean? It's clearly referring to the super soul. The Brahman is not situated in the heart of all living beings. Brahman is all pervading. So Jnayam, Jneyam, Jnanagamyam. Let's look at these three things. That there is knowledge, there is the object of knowledge, and then there is the goal of knowledge. So now object of knowledge and goal of knowledge, what is the difference? It's a subtle but significant difference. When a medical student a medical doctor is investigating a patient, at that time the object of knowledge, that means the thing that is about which knowledge is being wanted, that is the patient. So the patient's body technically. So different kinds of scans will be done, and getting knowledge about that is the object. But what is the goal of that knowledge? The goal is not just to get knowledge about the body. The goal is to get cured, to help improve the health of the patient, if not to help him get cured. So in that way, there is a difference between the object of knowledge and the goal of knowledge. And with respect to spiritual circles, there is jneya and there is the arena of knowledge. So as jnanagamya. So jnanam, jneyam, jnanagamyam. So actually jneya, we can know about anything. I can sit on this, take this wire and make a PhD thesis about wire. What color they should have, what composition they should have, what thickness they should have, what is the capacity of the electricity that should be allowed to pass through them. All these things we can make a PhD about it. Somebody might be able to use that knowledge also. To some extent it might be useful. But the important point is that is not transcendental knowledge. That is not the kind of knowledge that will liberate us from material existence. So, jneya for us is the Atma, the Paramatma, and the relationship of love between the two. Because when you understand the soul and the Lord and the mutually loving relationship, that knowledge brings liberation. So we discussed that is the jneya. So once Prabhupada was asked that, what is the use of of knowledge that doesn't serve any ultimate purpose? Prabhupada asked this to scientists. There was this Professor Benford who came for a morning walk with him, and he was saying that they were walking along in a garden. So Prabhupada said that, Professor Benford, so Prabhupada asked him, so what is the current scientific knowledge about the soul? And Prabhupada says, the scientist said, currently there is no scientific knowledge about the soul. So then your knowledge is useless. Prabhupada says, why? But no, it's a scientific knowledge is a different category of knowledge. Prabhupada said, that is fine. Yes, it may be a different category, but it is the most important character. Without knowing who you are, how can you know about anything more about how life is to be pursued? Now, they had a very stimulating discussion for a long time, and then Prabhupada decided to get back for giving the class. And as he was going, they were going back, and that scientist said that, Swamiji, you see, they pointed to the grass, and he said, Swamiji, now we have got 2 big volumes of books explaining how this grass grows. So Prabhupada replied, that grass was growing even without your books. What is the big deal? So now, no, but he said that, but Swamiji, if God did not want us to study that grass, why did he put the grass there? So Prabhupada said, my point is that you study the grass and you don't study at all the designer who put the grass there, the person who put the grass there. So that is fractured, diversed, segregated knowledge. such fragmented knowledge doesn't lead to integrated understanding. So for us, the jneya is not just matter. That is the jneya for science. But for us, the ultimate jneya is the Supreme Lord and the Atma and the relationship between the two. And jnanagamyam. What is the ultimate goal of the knowledge? To know more and more Krishna, to fall more and more in love with Krishna, to be eternally liberated to love and serve Krishna. That is jnanagamya. Jnanam jneyam jnanagamyam. So then after this, Prabhupada quotes several verses. Now Krishna gives a conclusion of this section. Iti kshetram tatha jnanam jneyam choktam samasata madbhakta etad vijnaya madbhavayopapadyate. Iti kshetram tatha jnanam. That this is, so in this way, Krishna said, I have told you about what? I told you about Kshetra, then I have told you about Jnana, and I have told you about Jneya. And of course, Krishna has talked about Kshetragya also, but the talk about Kshetragya was very brief. So Krishna mentions about Kshetra, and Kshetragya is included in Kshetram over here. So Kshetram tha Jnanam Jneyam Choktam Samasatah. In summary, I have described this to you. But who can actually understand this? Mad Bhakta Etad Vijnaya. So even in the heart of the Jnana section, what is Krishna telling over here? That one can know this knowledge by bhakti, not just by mental speculation, not just even by intellectual speculation, by bhakti. Etad vijnaya. And when one understands it, madbhavayo papadyate. One will attain madbhav. One will attain one's eternal spiritual nature. Krishna's spiritual nature actually. That means we will attain the spiritual level of existence. Will become liberated. So this is such a significant verse right in the heart of the Jnana section. So bhakti has come twice in this chapter. First it came in the Jnana section itself, in the 8 to 12 verses, Mai Chananya Yogena Bhakti Ravibhicharini. And now secondly it has come, Mad Bhakta Etad Vijnaya. Who can understand this? Means my Bhakta can understand this. So others cannot understand this. That means, even if one is practicing jnana, one has to include bhakti sadhana in it. And of course, if one focuses on cultivating bhakti itself, then the jnana will automatically come. Automatically means not spontaneously necessarily, but by steady, consistent practice, it will come about. Mad bhakta etad vijnaya. It is my devotees who will understand this. No one else can understand this. And mad bhava yopapadyate, by which they will attain to my nature. Thank you very much. We'll continue in our next class. We'll discuss about Purusha and Prakriti. Hare Krishna.